This is from Ryan Kennedy. And he says, surprised Elgin Baylor doesn't get as much talk when it comes to Lakers all-time greats. If ESPN was around when he was playing, I think he'd be a lot higher up on the pecking order, or maybe a lot people remember him being the GM for decades with the Clippers under Donald Sterling.
Yeah, I think he's kind of tainted because of the end of his career in that situation. But I think the modern-day fans of today don't pay much attention to what preceded today's stars. And you are correct. I mean, Elgin Baylor, it's like Oscar Robertson, the Big O, and Oscar Robertson was a tremendous player. It's just a different era. I don't think Elgin, though, is held in the same regard that Jerry West was, but then Jerry West no longer is held in the same regard because here came Magic Johnson, and that begat Kobe, and that brought us Shaq, and then obviously King James. So now you are correct. I mean, he was a legendary player. But now if you sat down, Ryan, and wrote down the stars who've worn the purple and gold, the ledger of royalty or Laker basketball, John, it's absolutely phenomenal. Going back to George Mikan back in the day when they moved from Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, there's so many great players that have worn that uniform. Elgin Baylor, yeah, I think of Elgin Baylor. Wasn't he in those old like Miller Lite commercials?
Yes.
You know, and Happy Hairston was spinning the ball. It's like up in the air. That was great stuff here. But there's another comment here from a Laker fan. This is from Dale Tums, and he says, Kareem is the greatest and has something James doesn't: humility.
Well, Kareem was reclusive, quiet, introverted to a degree, but that's a different era. That's before you had ESPN. That's before unsocial media. That's before the internet. If Kareem were the star today, he'd probably be getting accolades, and the spotlight would always be on him. But just different persona. But I will say this, Kareem and Bill Russell might have been the first two great African Americans who spoke out on social media issues of the day. Mm-hmm. LeBron does now, a number of other NBA guys do. But I think that those were the first two great ones who stood up and said, this is not right. This has to change.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many special players here. I mean, I just love seeing Kareem at that event, when he, like you say, when he passed the ball off. And I know they've had a little friction, those two, about talking about COVID and masks and other things. I have great respect for Kareem. I mean, it's the more I learned about him as a retired athlete. I mean, he's a very special man. So he's the captain too. I mean, you got to give him up for that. But God, I mean, the Lakers history, how many teams in pro sports have that many guys? I mean, maybe the Yankees. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, in the NBA, somebody wearing green in Boston would probably yell at you and say, we were pretty good during the Red Auerbach era. Okay, let's move on to the next question and our fans forum. Where do you want to go?
Okay, so we got a bunch of YouTube comments here. And this is a good one here from Tractors and Nonsense. And he's talking about, Sean Payton, I am the law, when he wrote it down there.
I knew this was coming.
Is this the same coach that sat out a season because he broke someone else's law?
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, he was the head coach, and head coaches are responsible for everything. And he was there during Bounty Gate and all that, although it was really devised by his defensive coordinator, Greg Williams. But he sat out. He came back. He won again. I think he's probably been forgiven by virtue of all that. It's going to be fun to see what they do in the offseason. His press conferences, I am the law. I mean, he just really strong about my team, my way, my philosophy. But yet he's spoken out tremendously about Russell Wilson. And his unique comment today at the Super Bowl was there are a lot of people in this organization who have dirt on their hands. Mm-hmm. This was not Russell Wilson's fault. This team went 5-12.
Aha.
So I could see him at a team meeting, stand up and hand out bars of ivory soap to everybody. You have dirt on your hands. The reason we went 5-12. It's going to be fascinating to see once we get to free agency the first week of March, because I think he's going to be a magnet for free agents, and that ownership wants to spend, and they got cap space to spend because they had such a young team. It'd be interesting to see what other players land on board. But yeah, he committed a sin. He went to confession, and now he's the coach of the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, he is. I mean, what just crazy stories going on. Here's another one talking about Eric Coryell getting into the Hall of Fame. And this is from M. Allen. He says, it's ridiculous that he was not inducted when he was alive. His offensive strategies, formations, and plays are in every NFL game. His time as a coach was not long, but it was very impactful and it dominated. The Hall of Fame for the forgotten needs to be created and now. Ask Hall of Famer Charlie Joyner if the coach is deserving. The Chargers and the Hall need to lean on their brothers. And guess what? I'm a Raiders fan from way back.
Well, I will tell you this: the structure of voting for the Hall of Fame has changed. When Don Coryell's name was out there for 6 to 8 years, it was just a list of 15, and he made the final 15. But now the structure has changed. You got the current players, you've got the players of yesteryear, and now you have what they call, I guess it's the contributor class. And that's where Don Coryell's name now falls in, contributor class as a coach. There's no doubt the creative genius of what he was. I mean, I think back, the greatest football mind of yesteryear was Paul Brown, Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, film, video study, draft, etc. He created what the NFL was about to become. More modern day, the entire operation of the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise, who they are, who owns them, whom they hire, who they keep, and just how they progress down the road with all the Super Bowl victories. And obviously, the Raiders have to be part of that equation. But Don kind of fell under a different umbrella because he only won 111 games over the course of his NFL career. He had a sub 500 playoff record, never, ever got the Chargers, as great as they were for that 4 or 5 year window, to the Super Bowl. And I think people kind of looked and held that against him. But I think from the creative standpoint, as a contributor class member, yeah, I think Don Coryell Hall of Fame means an awful lot of sense to an awful lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, think of his coaching tree too. I mean, John Madden, Joe Gibbs. I mean, a lot of guys are from the Coryell playbook, and I think you could even say that Bill Walsh kind of built on a little bit of what Coryell did in the '70s. Bill Walsh brought some of that to the '80s in that short passing game. This guy is legit. He needs to get in, but this may be his last shot.
Exactly. Any more questions there you want to throw at me here before you put a lid on this one?
Yeah, we got a good one here. This is kind of a long one, but I think this was a great question from 44 Ron 73, talking about the Texans and should they draft a quarterback. And he says, I personally would go defense first because in my unprofessional opinion, these quarterbacks aren't it. You know, it's talking about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Either too thin, too small, too inaccurate, or too jumpy in the pocket. Get the defense up to speed, and I mean speed. Then draft a few offensive players. The Niners beat teams up and down with their defense. Our defense could be that, and probably more if we pick in the draft right. Get Carter and scare the crap out of the AFC South. Look at the Jags defense. That's what we have to compete with for the next couple of years.
Agree. It is also a top-heavy draft. What Houston could do at number 2 is trade back. Now, they'd have to be convinced that they're not sure that Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are the real deal, because those are the names at the top of the draft board. You could trade back stockpile picks and go get offensive linemen and go get defensive players. But in this league, last I checked, you still need a quarterback. You really need a quarterback. You know, my favorite phrase in the National Football League is, if you got a quarterback, good for you. And if you don't have a quarterback, you better go find one. So it'll be up to this administration with the new coach for D'Amico Ryans and that group of scouts and that general manager, Nick Caserio, to evaluate the Alabama quarterback, evaluate the Ohio State quarterback. Are they the right guy? How fast along can you bring them? So you're better to take a quarterback and groom them, because you sure don't have one now. You had an anemic offense. Or is it better just to stockpile linemen? It's not sexy to take tackles or defensive linemen or linebackers and just build it defensively. But you still got to have offense to be able to compete in the league. Because if you can't bloody score, the best you get is a 10-0 shutout, and you still lose no matter how good or how hard your defense plays. That's one man's opinion. Yours?
Well, think about this. I mean, they had a chance, you know, to really have that number 1 pick, but they went out there and won the last game of the year. And so I know a lot of Texan fans were upset about it. I think you got to take a quarterback. I mean, you just gotta, especially to satisfy your fan base, season ticket holders. If it's up to me, I'm going for the kid from Alabama.
He's a winner. There's no doubt about it. CJ Stroud, to me, lost a little luster from the middle of the season on through the end. Ohio State had the 2 bad setbacks at the end of the campaign. After he lost his running backs, he just didn't seem to be the same quarterback. But that's why you go through pro day. That's why you will go to the combines. That's why you will have the private meetings, and then you'll be able to bring him in and talk to them specifically and put stuff up on the whiteboard. It'll be fascinating. But we'll talk more draft once we get beyond Super Bowl Sunday.